Hello there. My name is Dwayne Dodson, and I am an assistant professor of English at Stark State College in Canton, Ohio. What I'm going to do for you today is to provide you with some tips and tricks to help you get through the writing portion of the ACCUPLACER test, which is a good test to take prior to entering college. We teach developmental classes, and those are classes that you can skip and move on closer towards your major if you score a high enough mark on your ACCUPLACER test. Now, there is an ACCUPLACER grammar test and there is an ACCUPLACER essay test. Today, we are going to review the ACCUPLACER writing test, not the essay test, but the writing test that deals with grammar, punctuation, organization, that type of thing. First, I'm going to tell you some tips and tricks and some things you want to be aware of, and then I'm going to share the screen with you, and we are going to review some of the questions that are on the writing portion of the test. The ACCUPLACER test is a test that will test you in a number of different areas of writing, everything from grammar to punctuation to organization to comprehension. There is a reading test, but this test will focus specifically on writing. There is no time limit on the test that we're going to review today. However, there is a time limit on the essay test. And again, we're not going to talk about the essay test today. I will tell you initially that it's very important. I always tell my students to follow instructions. Don't just skip through what you read. Read it carefully, and then make sure that you do your best to follow the instructions and do what is asked of you. In terms of test taking, one of the tips that I always give is to use the process of elimination. What does that mean? That means try to eliminate the wrong answers first, and then what you have left will be most likely the correct answer. So this is a multiple choice test. There will be 25 questions, 5 passages to read, 5 groups of paragraphs to read, and you are asked 5 questions per paragraph. So there are all kinds of ACCUPLACER writing tests and tests of all of the other types as well available online. The website that we are going to use is accuplacer.org, and I will show you how to get to that when I share the screen. I will also say don't overthink it. Oftentimes the first answer is the correct answer, the first answer that comes to mind. Now, again, you won't be timed on this portion of the test, so you'll have some time to think, but avoid thinking that a question is correct and then second guessing yourself, because most of the time you need to go by your first instinct. Once you're finished with a particular answer, review it again. I can't tell you how many times I check all of my emails, all of my texts. I proofread them, even though they may be to my friends or to my family, and you may think, well, that's not important. Well, I'm an English teacher, I'm a grammar teacher, and so it's very important to me to try to achieve the highest level of quality possible, and it should be important to you as well, particularly for this test, since obviously you're going to be counted off for wrong answers. Okay, I'm going to share the screen with you now. After I have done so, we're going to take a look at about 10 questions on the writing test. We are going to use what's called the Learn As You Go mode. After we utilize that, then you will be able to see the right answers and the reasons for those answers, which is important. And what I'm going to do for you is, before I show you what the answer is, I'll be able to confirm that right answer for you. You'll see how it works. But the software allows you to choose an answer, and then it will let you know whether that answer is correct or incorrect, and then it will provide an explanation to try to make this process as efficient as possible for you. In terms of a visual practice session, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the rationale behind my choice of the answer, and then afterwards I will click on the confirmation to determine whether that answer is correct or incorrect, and then you will be able to see the reason that the software provides for it. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen now, and then after I've shared the screen, we will begin and get through however many questions we can. All right, so I'm sharing the screen now. Now, to access this screen, you want to simply Google ACCUPLACER.org, and that will take you to the practice app, and you'll click on the practice app, and that will take you here. Now, you can see that there are a number of different tests here. You can practice for all of the tests that you have to take, but of course, we're focused today on the writing test, and that's where we're going to go here. So for ACCUPLACER writing, you see there is the Learn as you go option as well as the practice test. The Learn as you go option I mentioned earlier, that's the one that we are going to use for today because it will provide us with the most valuable information. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on Learn as you go. I've already begun that test. I'm just going to click on No here so I can start it again. And I will go back to the beginning. There are actually two sample tests that you can access, and they alternate from one to the other. So if when you go on this site, if you don't find this particular test that we're going to be reviewing today, then you just want to click out of it and then click back into it. Exit that test and go back in, and then it will take you to this test. So there are just, as I say, two samples for the writing test, and this is the one we're going to be talking about today. So you want to utilize this test. Now, I would strongly advise that you read certainly all of the passages. As the instructions said initially, there are 5 questions for 5 passages, 25 questions total. And after each passage or set of passages here, set of paragraphs here, you will have 4 questions. The first choice is always as it is now, which means that you just leave the sentence as is, and then the rest are different choices. I would advise you to start out by reading the entire passage so you can have a sense of the content and the context for the answers. I'm not going to read this all here for purposes of saving time, but what you might want to do is freeze your screen and then read that passage so that when we review the questions, you will be familiar with the material. So why don't you go ahead and do that now. Freeze your screen, read the passage all the way through, and then we will move down here to answer the questions. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start answering those questions now. Now, the first question is question number 1 of 25. You see it says question 1 of 25 here. So question 1 of 25, which is the best version of the underlined portion of sentence 1? All of the questions are set in this format. And you see sentence number 1 is italicized here. You might think car camping means that you literally sleep in your car, but that's not quite right. And of course, if we refer to question 1, we see the same sentence here, or sentence 1 rather, we see the same sentence here. So now let's talk a little bit about answering that question. Now, if I were to ask you, excuse me, if I were to ask you what would be the most important piece of knowledge you would need to effectively answer this question, you probably would say, we need to know the meaning of the underlined word, and you would be absolutely correct. What does that tell you? It tells you vocabulary is important. If you don't know what the word literally means, if you're not familiar with that adjective, then you're probably going to be in not too good shape when you try to answer the question. Of course, the word literally means word for word. Pardon me. So the word literally means word for word. And then these are your choices. Again, the first choice is always as it is now. Then the second choice is, should you replace literally with sincerely? Should you replace it with precisely, or should you replace it with strictly? Well, let's look at the sentence again. You might think car camping means that you literally sleep in your car, but that's not quite right. I often recommend using the process of elimination. Sincerely, precisely, those don't fit in this context. but if you read the sentence, it should seem right to you. You might think car camping means that you literally sleep in your car, but that's not quite right. So if it seems right to you and you don't have any reason to think that there is a problem with it, then you want to select as it is now. Again, sincerely, precisely, those don't really fit in that context. What about strictly? Strictly means exactly as it is with no wiggle room. And strictly is very close to literally, but literally is used specifically to mean word for word or verbatim. And so that is the answer that we would need to select here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on as it is now, and then I'm going to click on submit. And you see what it does. It asks you to confirm your selection. Click confirm to submit this answer. We'll go ahead and click confirm, and then it tells you that your answer is correct. And it provides you with the reason. Let's see what it says here. This is the best answer because it provides the most precise wording for this context. And again, the word literally means exactly the words that are on the page. If I were to say to you, I told you 1,000 times to take out the trash. Well, obviously, I didn't tell you 1,000 times, so I did not mean that literally. In order for that statement to literally be correct, I would have to have told you 1,000 times. And of course, I'm not going to count the number of times I've told you. So that's essentially what's happening here. A definition of literally is actually the sentence sets up a contrast between a misconception readers may have about car camping and what is actually true about it. Okay? All right, let's move on to the next sentence. Again, same passage. We've already read that. So now we move on to sentence number 2, and it does the same thing. Again, the same format, but this one is focused on sentence 7. What is the best version of the underlined portion of sentence 7? Reproduced below. Although I can fill my car instead of carrying all of the equipment, I'm also free to bring a comfortable chair, my favorite camping snacks, and a stack of books to read. Now, this is a question that deals with grammar. Specifically, you see the underlined word is although, and what it's asking you is which of the 4 choices here is best for the blank. All right, we have again the ever present as it is now. That's always the first choice. And then we have 3 other choices. Well, you know that the word although is used for contrast. If I were to say, although I am tired, I'm not going to take a nap right now. The first part of that sentence contrasts with the second part. So the question is, do you need contrast here? Although I can fill my car instead of carrying all of the equipment, I'm free to bring a comfortable chair, my favorite camping snacks, and a stack of books to read. The first part of this sentence does not contrast with the second one. What you really want is cause and effect. Because I can fill my car instead of carrying all of the equipment, I'm also free. So because this situation is true, or this condition exists, then this condition can exist. And that's why because would be correct here. And is just additional as it is now. Again, we talked about the fact that you don't want contrast here, and although would indicate contrast, and then so that would not work either, but although needs to be replaced with because. Go ahead and click submit, and then you click confirm, and then that one is correct as well. Okay, so now we move on to the next sentence. Again, we have 3 more on the same passage, so you don't have to reread these. And we go on to question number 3. Which is the most logical placement for sentence 12? Reproduced below. So this one is going to require that you reread at least a paragraph of the passage. Why? Because it's asking you for placement, which means you need to understand the order of the sentences. Let's look at the sentence, sentence 12. Among the trees, campers have set up outdoor living rooms with chairs, tables, and fire pits. Okay? Now, it's asking you to determine the correct placement for sentence number 12 in the context of the other sentences. So let's go to sentence number 12, which is contained here in the third paragraph here. And this is sentence number 12 here. Now we really need to read this whole paragraph in order to understand whether sentence 12 needs to be placed in a different location. So let's go ahead and read that particular paragraph. Once I arrive at the site, I'm amazed at how different my surroundings are from the road I was just traveling. There are cars everywhere, but no traffic. I quickly set up my tent, grab my trail maps, and pull on my boots. Among the trees, campers have set up outdoor living rooms with chairs, tables, and fire pits. I sling on my day pack filled with water and snacks and hit the trail. It takes me up a steep bluff, and then I am able to walk along the river, enjoying majestic views of rippling, tall grass prairies, cliffs, capped with creamy limestone and circling bald eagles. Okay, so what is the deal with sentence number 12, which is the one we're looking at? Does that need to be moved? Well, what does it say? Or what does it do more appropriately? It provides, sentence number 12 here really provides a description. It's part of the scene. What's going on? Campers have set up outdoor living rooms, etc., etc. And then let's look at the sentences above it. The paragraph begins with the individual arriving at the site and just kind of surveying and seeing his surroundings. There are cars everywhere, but no traffic. And then sentence number 11 talks about what the individual does once he's there. And then we go to sentence number 12, and that's more of the scene setting. That's more of the detail. So it's logical that sentence number 12 would go between the existing sentence number 10 and the existing number 11. So because why? Again, because sentence number 9, you're arriving at the site. Sentence number 10, again, you're looking around. And then sentence number 12 continues with that description. Among the trees, you see your campers. And then sentence number 11 would make sense because now you move on to talking about what you do once you are set into the site. So which of these options provides a choice for you to move that sentence number 12 after sentence number 10? As it is now, wouldn't work. Before sentence 9, well, you certainly wouldn't put it before sentence 9 because sentence number 9 begins that paragraph with arrival at the site. So you certainly wouldn't talk about the description of the site before you arrive there. And then after sentence 10, here we go. There are cars everywhere, but no traffic. So that looks like a possibility. After sentence 14, that really wouldn't make sense because that's right at the end of the passage. So it looks to me like you're going to want to move sentence 12 to after sentence 10. So let's click on that. And then we click confirm. And we are correct. This is the best answer because it results in the most logical placement of the sentence, which describes the scene that the writer observes after arriving at the campsite, but before going hiking. Again, it's all part of the description before the actual action. None of the other suggested placements make sense in the chronology or the time order of the paragraph, okay? Now, what you'll see here when you review this on your own is that you will actually have two ways of reviewing your answer for correctness. You will have the actual real-time discussion and explanation that I've been providing for you, and then you will have this, which is the answer that the program provides. So that really kind of gives you kind of a double means of checking your answer. Let's move on. Okay, question 4 of 25. Again, the same passage here, so I won't read that. And let's go on to the question, which is the best version of the underlined portion of sentence 14. It takes me up a steep bluff, and then I am able to walk along the river, enjoying majestic views of rippling tall grass, prairies, cliffs, capped with cream limestone, and circling bald eagles. Okay, so let's look at our options here. Again, as it is now, the first one. And then the second choice, it takes me to a steep bluff, and then I am able to walk along the river enjoying majestic views of rippling tall grass, prairies, cliffs capped with creamy limestone, and circling bald eagles. That would be the reading of the first choice. Notice I read the whole sentence again in this particular situation. Why? Because if you notice here, all of your choices have punctuation. And punctuation really, proper punctuation really requires careful reading of the sentence. It's not really a grammatical issue, it's a punctuation issue. So I like the second option here. Let's take a look at the third option. We've got prairies, comma, cliffs capped with creamy limestone, comma, and. Okay, I like the first section here, the first two sections, prairies, cliffs capped with creamy limestone. You will notice they are exactly the same. The third choice is exactly the same as the second choice with one differentiation. What is that? It is that there's a comma after and. Very, very rarely do you place a comma after and. If you have items in a series, as we have here, the comma needs to go before the and not after. So we can eliminate the third choice here as a possibility and look at the fourth one. If you look at the fourth one, I don't even have to read that one. You should know and recognize that you need some comma somewhere here. And given that there's no comma in this this particular part of the, or this particular option, then you know that that's not right. So we go back to the second choice here. This makes the most sense. We go ahead and click on that. Oh, one thing I forgot to do was really explain why as it is now is not correct. Let's look at the sentence as it is. We talked about why the third and the fourth choice aren't correct, but I didn't really talk about eliminating as it is now as an option. So if we look at this, let's just read the whole sentence again. It takes me up a steep bluff, and then I am able to walk along the river, enjoying majestic views of rippling tall grass prairies, cliffs capped with creamy limestone, and circling bald eagles. What is problematic here is the comma after cliffs, and there does not need to be a comma here, because the items that you're separating here are majestic views of rippling tall grass prairies, okay, and then the cliffs are capped with creamy limestone. So all of that needs to be one unit, which is what we have down here. So you need a comma after prairies, and then a comma after limestone, and then of course you have your last item. So this is our choice here. We go ahead and click submit. We click confirm, and aha, we are correct. And again, you can read this explanation on your own, but it essentially mirrors what I explained earlier. Let's move on. Okay, question 5 of 25. Now, just to let you know, at this point, we're about halfway through. I'm not going to do all 25 questions, or else you'd be here forever, and you've got to have some time to yourself, right? I love teaching grammar, so I could do this forever, but I'm not going to subject you to that torture. So we're going to go through about 5 more after this one, 10 sentences, and then we'll finish up. Okay, so you see, this is sentence again, question number 5, and again, as I mentioned to you earlier, and you saw in the introduction, you have 5 questions per passage. So after we finish this, we should have 1 more passage to review, 5 questions for that second passage, and then that will be it, and then you can finish the rest of this on your own. Okay, on to the question here. After sentence 16, the writer wants to advance the narrative with descriptive details similar to those elsewhere in the passage. Which choice best accomplishes this goal. Okay, so we look at after sentence 16. This question 5, really deals with details. That's what we're talking about here. And so sentence 16 is at the end of the passage, the last paragraph here. Since again, we're not dealing with grammar or punctuation, we're dealing with details. That's similar to organization. And if you recall, when we had that earlier question dealing with organization, we needed to read the particular paragraph, and we're going to do that again here. So since we're focused on sentence 16, let's read the short paragraph in which sentence 16 occurs. Back at my tent, I am welcomed by the scent of campfire wafting through the twilit campsite. I feast on hot dogs, baked beans, and roasted marshmallows. In the morning, I awaken refreshed and ready for another day on the trails. When I walk back into work on Monday, no one will imagine that I have spent the past 2 days exploring the wild. Okay, and again, to review the question, after sentence 16, the writer wants to advance the narrative with descriptive details similar to those elsewhere in the passage. So which choice best accomplishes this goal? So we're looking for what he's trying to do after sentence 16, where he talks about, he's gone back to the tent after his little hike, and he's eaten, and then after that, he wants to advance the narrative with descriptive details. So let's look at our choices. Here we don't have an as it is now, but we do have here the first choice. Writers like Henry David Thoreau and William Wordsworth extol the virtues of time spent in nature. Well, that's really not a descriptive detail. That's really a reflection. So since we're talking about descriptive details here, I think we can eliminate this first choice. What about the second one? And again, what you want to do is you want to go back, always refer to your sentence itself so you can keep the context in mind. Again, what has he done? He's returned to his tent. He's welcomed by the campfire, or the scent of campfire, and then he's eaten. So in order to continue those descriptive details, again, we don't need the reflection as we have here. What about the second choice? What does he do after he's eaten? I tuck into my snug tent and the crickets sing me to sleep. Aha, now that sounds like a nice continuation of that descriptive narrative. After he's eaten, he's ready to rest. I know I'm always ready to rest after I eat, so a little adjective here, snug tent, and then a little kind of a metaphor, personification of the wild, or the insects there, the crickets sing me to sleep. So I kind of like this as a possibility. But remember I was saying earlier, you never want to just pick something that looks right without looking at all of your choices, because it's asking for the best option. So even though we like the second option, let's look at the other ones. The night is nice, but I go to sleep early because hiking tires a person out. Okay, well, part of this sentence is descriptive, but the other part is more of an observation. So although there's some description here, I don't quite like this choice as much as I like the second choice. And let's check the last one. Campers must ensure that their fires are a safe distance from trees and tents to prevent accidents. Okay, well, that's not really descriptive at all. That's an instruction, a direction, an admonition. That's not going to work. So my choice, and yours, whether you know it or not, will be the second one. So let's see whether the program agrees, confirm our selection, and voila, it does. Okay? All right, moving on. Okay, so here you see we have another set of paragraphs here, another passage, and this is an early draft of an essay, and then you have to choose the best answer to the question or the best completion of the statement. So you see the same format as we had earlier, but a different passage. So again, you want to pause your screen here, freeze your screen, and go ahead and read this. I'm not going to read the whole thing through. You guys can go ahead and do that on your own time. And then we're just going to move on to the answers to the questions rather. Okay, which is the best version of the underlying portion of sentence 1? Standing in front of his high tunnel on a sunny June day, Virginia farmer Dave O'Neill said his family had started seeding tomatoes for that year's harvest back in December, when temperatures often dipped below freezing. Okay, now, what are your choices? Again, we have the ubiquitous as it is now. And then, without even reviewing these carefully, if you know anything about punctuation or spelling or grammar, you know that there is a problem with this, with the second choice here, because in the context of the sentence, we're saying his family had started seeding tomatoes. You notice that the tomatoes in the example here, that is the proper plural for the word tomato. But the apostrophe here means it's either possessive or a contraction, and you don't want that here. So right away, we can eliminate that possibility because we want seeding tomatoes, seeding more than one tomato. You don't use an apostrophe for a plural. You use an S or an ES, and then there are some irregular plurals that have different forms. But certainly this is not going to be correct because this is the possessive. This would either be the possessive or the contraction. So we know that that's out. What about this? Well, again, we know that that's wrong for the same reason, because it's possessive. This just happens to be the plural possessive, but it's still possessive, and we've determined we don't need the possessive here. We simply need the plural. So the third choice is wrong. And what about the fourth choice here? Well, the focus on this one, even though tomatoes is in the proper possessive form as it is in the target sentence here, if we look at years, years is a word that needs to be in the possessive because it is that year's harvest. That's where your apostrophe comes in. So what is that suggesting? That's suggesting that this choice is the correct choice. This choice is incorrect because you're missing the apostrophe for the plural, for the possessive of years. And these are both wrong because they have tomatoes in the possessive and they should simply be singular. So in this particular situation, we want as it is now. Go ahead and click submit and confirm, and we are good. Okay, so we move on to the next. Let's see, read the following early draft of an essay, choose the best answer, same instruction here, which is the best version of the underlined portion of sentence 5. The arches are covered with a durable plastic that allows sunlight to filter inside and warm the soil to a temperature higher than those of the ground temperature outside. This is sentence number 7, or question number 7 rather, just trying to keep track of our time here. And the problem here is this is a grammatical issue which might be a little difficult for you to figure out. What I always do when I'm taking a test like this is read the sentence itself, even without the choices, and see if I can figure out a problem. Now, the problem that I see here is a little difficult to recognize if you don't have a decent grammatical foundation. But let's read it again and see what jumps out. The arches are covered with a durable plastic that allows sunlight to filter inside and warm the soil to a temperature higher than. The problem here is the word those, because this pronoun refers to or means to refer to temperature. Temperature is singular. A temperature. You see the article a here, so it is singular. And if you're comparing it, you have to compare it to another, or you have to use another singular pronoun for reference. And those is a demonstrative pronoun, but it's not in the singular, it's in the plural. I would say those apples are rotten. I would say that apple is rotten. And what I'm saying here essentially is that since this word is supposed to refer to this word, and this word is temperature and not temperatures, since it is singular, what you're going to need to do is change this to the singular demonstrative pronoun, which is that, okay? So you would simply replace this to read, the arches are covered with a durable plastic that allows sun to filter inside and warm the soil to a temperature higher than that of the ground temperature outside. We click submit, we click confirm, and we are correct. Move on to next. Almost finished there, hang in there, okay? And then the question here is, which is the most logical placement for sentence 9? Reproduce below. This is question number 8. This is organization and sentence placement again. And the deal here is the order is what we're looking for. In March, they replaced the plastic on the arches to begin the process of warming the soil so that the tomato plants could be transferred there by April. And so the deal here is we want to determine where this should be placed. And so if we move back to the paragraph in which sentence 9 occurs, we'll read this passage and again try to make the determination of the correct placement. So I'm going to go ahead and read the paragraph, not the passage. The process of sowing tomatoes in winter began not in the tunnel, but in the sunroom inside the O'Neills' home. The O'Neills sowed tomato seeds in flats filled with soil, and then, once the seedlings were big enough, potted them and moved the plants into their greenhouse, which would warm to over 80 degrees on sunny days. In March, they replaced the plastic on the arches to begin the process of warming the soil so that the tomato plants could be transferred there by April. In February, it was time to prepare the high tunnel for planting. The O'Neills drove a no-till tractor through the tunnel's uncovered arches to loosen the soil and then applied vitamin-rich compost. Excuse me. Okay, so we are focused on sentence number 9, which is this sentence here. And the question is, where should it be moved to? Is it okay as it is now? Should it be before sentence 7 or after sentence 7 or after sentence 11? Okay, well, what does sentence 9 talks about? It talks about plastic on arches, replacing plastic on arches to begin the process of warming the soil. So where are arches mentioned since they're talking about replacing the plastic on arches? Well, sentence 7 doesn't talk about plastic. Sentence 8 doesn't talk about plastic. Sentence 9 talks about plastic. In March, they replaced the plastic on the arches. Is there another sentence that talks about plastic? In February, it was time to prepare the high tunnel for planting. The O'Neills drove a no-till tractor through the tunnel's covered arches to loosen the soil and then applied vitamin-rich compost. Okay, so what do we have here? We have arches in sentence 11 and arches in sentence 9. So if we look at the placement of those two sentences, we're talking about driving a no-till tractor through the arches in sentence 11 and then replacing the arches in sentence 9. So it seems to me that it would make sense to put the replacement of the plastic on the arches after sentence 11. And do we have that as a choice? Yes, we do. After sentence 11, submit, confirm, and we are correct. Okay, so moving on, this is the second to the last question that we'll deal with today. After sentence 12, the writer wants to illustrate Lee's quotation with a brief anecdote. Which choice best accomplishes this goal? Okay, now, here you don't really need to read the passage, although it's very short here. But this, as was the case with one of our earlier sentences, correctly answering this sentence really requires that you need to know the definition of a certain word. What word would that be? That word would be anecdote, oftentimes confused with antidote, which is a cure, A-N-T-I-D-O-T-E. That's antidote. This is anecdote. What is an anecdote? An anecdote is a story, typically a story provided to prove a point or to make an example. So since that's what we're looking for here, let's take a look and see which one of these choices reads most like a story. Well, if we look at this first choice here, according to US climate data, that's going to be out right away. Why? Because that doesn't begin a story. How about the second choice? During an unusual blizzard in April, aha, we have a narrative here. We have kind of a once upon a time indicator. During an unusual blizzard in April, Dave was out on skis, sweeping snow off the plastic cover while Lee hooked up space heaters inside the tunnel to keep the plants warm. Aha, there's an anecdote. An anecdote is I'm going to tell you something that happened in order to prove a point or provide an example. So there is an anecdote. Again, even though we have an anecdote here, let's not stop reading. Let's see if there is something else, because there might be another anecdote provided that is a more effective example. Let's see. Sometimes the temperatures drop below freezing. No, that's not an anecdote. That's not a story. And then the last choice here, the O'Neill spring tomatoes are as fresh and tasty. That's just an observation and an opinion. That's not an anecdote. It's got to be the second choice. Does it? Can't confirm. And yes, it does. Okay. All right. So here we go. And then this is the last example that we're going to get to today. And again, there are 15 others. We're at 10 out of 25. You can do the rest on your own. And let's see what we are asked here. In context, which is the best version of the underlined portion of sentence 15? A competent customer knowingly explained, you must have a high tunnel. Okay, let's read this passage. It's going to be, since it's the last sentence, it's going to be in the last paragraph of the passage here. And let's read that and see if we can figure out what the answer might be. We're trying to create summer conditions inside the tunnel during spring, said Dave's wife, Lee, which can be risky. The plants survived, and the O'Neills were able to provide their customers with tomatoes several months before tomatoes normally come into season. Tomatoes in May? A competent customer knowingly exclaimed, you must have a high tunnel. So, what are our possibilities here? The adjective competent, would that be effective as is? Or does it need to be replaced with savvy, intellectual, or cunning? Well, basically, if we look at the passage, what we find here is that this customer was provided an explanation of what Dave's wife was and Dave were trying to do in their farming. And when all his wife mentioned was that was basically what they were trying to do in terms of creating the optimal conditions for the tunnel, with the tunnel for the tomatoes, but somehow the customer was able to infer that a high tunnel was required in order for Dave and his wife to do what they had to do. What does that mean? That means that the customer knew enough about planning to infer that a high tunnel was necessary in order for the farmers to accomplish their goal. And so what that means is that certainly the customer was competent, but there is a word here in these choices that is even more suitable than competent. And that means, it's a word that means essentially knowledgeable. Competent means efficient, effective, and able to establish a high degree of quality. But there is a word that means, if I know this, if I know these situations, or these situations exist, I have enough experience and I have enough knowledge so that I know what needs to come as a result of that. And that word is savvy. Now, again, you've noticed, I think we've had 3 situations here in which vocabulary has been important. And if you don't know what the word savvy means, then you're not going to have much of a chance of getting sentences correct that require that you have a knowledge of vocabulary. And the only way you can learn vocabulary is to read and practice, so I would insist that you do that. Intellectual, that is not quite right for this situation. It means knowledgeable in kind of a brainy kind of way, which is really not required in this situation. Cunning means clever, kind of sneaky. That's not really suitable here. And although competent would probably be closest to correct, again, savvy has that particularized meaning. We'll click on savvy, click confirm, and we are correct. And that will do it. Okay? So I hope this session was helpful for you, and I wish you the best of luck on your ACCUPLACER writing test. Take care and have yourselves a good day. Bye.